The epic of the 22nd French-Canadian Battalion recounts experiences of the famed Vendus, the only French-speaking infantry battalion in the Canadian Expeditionary Force during the First World War. The book's author, Sergeant Major Claudius Cornloo, uses vivid and dramatic language to recount the experiences, horrors, and triumphs of the Vendus during the First World War. The epic of the 22nd French-Canadian Battalion is just one example of a primary source that provides evidence about the soldiers' day-to-day lives and exploits in battle. What can Cornloo's account tell us about the Vendus' beliefs, feelings, attitudes, values, and emotions during the last 100 days? Is it a reliable account of soldiers' experiences during this period? There are 5 key steps to analyzing primary sources. The 5 W's: context, exploring, reaching conclusions, finding proof. Consider the 5 W's. Who is the author? What kind of source is it? When and where was it written? Why did the author write this account? Sergeant Major Claudius Cornloo was an unconventional soldier in the 22nd Battalion. Born in the Alsace region of France in 1885, he was neither Quebecois nor French-Canadian, but was living and working in Montreal as a florist and freelance journalist when he decided to enlist in the Canadian Expeditionary Force. Cornloo received special permission from his commanding officers to keep a diary of the unit while serving on the Western Front. Upon his return to Montreal after the war, Cornloo used his diary to write an account of the Vendus' experience during the war. The book is an eyewitness record of the events experienced by the thousands of soldiers who served in the 22nd Battalion during the war. Not quite a memoir, not quite a history. How does this information shape our understanding of the epic of the 22nd French-Canadian Battalion? How trustworthy is Cornloo's account of the events? Cornloo was not an impartial witness. He fought, he sacrificed, he experienced the horror of battle, winning the Military Medal and the coveted Distinguished Conduct Medal. In this period of significant tension between French and English Canadians, French-Canadian soldiers serving overseas were often left out of stories and reports in English-Canadian media. Cornloo seized the opportunity to memorialize the tragedy of the fallen, to showcase the battalion's noble efforts and victories, and to show his comrades in a heroic light and inspire young Quebecois with the story of the Vendus. The glorious past of the 22nd has become a sanctuary of hope, a sacred place for the younger generations. We talked about the 22nd a lot. We will always keep talking about it. Its accomplishments are eternal. It is an epic poem from prologue to epilogue, but the marvels written therein will never match the sublimity of their actions. Contextualizing primary sources helps us better understand the time and place in which primary sources were created. What was happening at the time that Cornloo wrote his account? From the outset of the war, Germany had occupied much of northern France and Belgium. But after years of brutal fighting and costly stalemate in the area, the Allies carried out a series of successful assaults through the summer and autumn of 1918. The Battle of Amiens, which began August 8th, marked the launch of this offensive. Journalists and military leaders identified this date as a turning point after the war was over. Only then did the triumphs over the next 3 months become known as the last 100 days. At the Battle of Amiens, the Vendus were part of the second wave of the attack. They faced heavy German resistance. Our turn came at 10:45. In artillery formation, the soldiers of the 22nd passed over the 18th Battalion. The village was overrun. At that point, a German plane flew over us and signaled our presence with 2 flares. The instant became critical. We were bombarded with 10 shells per second. We ran forward. A new threat. The German gunners, hidden behind trees and bushes, were offering a fierce resistance. They retreated methodically, causing losses as they went. After several days of intense fighting at Amiens, the Allied forces prevailed. Overwhelmed by the French, harassed by the Australians, and followed by the Canadians, the Germans were retreating all along the combat line. The Allies advanced about 22 kilometers, their greatest progress on the Western Front since 1914. Although their defenses were weakened, German soldiers continued to defend this sector and others along the Western Front. A few weeks after Amiens, the 4 divisions of the Canadian Corps arrived at Arras, where they were expected to fight through a heavily fortified German trench system defended by hundreds of machine guns, thousands of soldiers, and tens of thousands of meters of barbed wire. The objective was twofold. First, capture Monchy and other villages in the Scarpe River Valley, and second, smash through the Drocourt-Quéant line, a crucial section of the Hindenburg Line. Victory here was considered essential for launching future attacks at the Canal du Nord and Cambrai. Beginning August 26th, the Second Battle of Arras saw 100,000 Canadians, plus other Allied forces, press forward into enemy lines. Despite defending their positions with devastating machine gun fire, by September 3rd, the Germans were forced to retreat further east. They suffered heavy losses, including large numbers of casualties, prisoners taken, and weapons captured. The battle was also enormously costly for the Canadian Corps, which suffered roughly 11,000 casualties during the 2 phases of the operation. The toll on the Vendôme's officers and troops was particularly devastating. Colonel Dubuc fell while leading his men. Major Vanier lost a leg. Majors Routier, Roy, and Archambault, Captain Morgan, Lieutenants Lamotte and Lemieux, all of the list were extinguished. Of the 22 officers that took part in this Homeric battle, not a single one was spared. Of the 600 shock troops, only 70 were able to muster. Despite high casualties, Allied forces gained victories through September, October, and November at the Canal du Nord, Cambrai, Valenciennes, and Mons. The Vendômes fought in each battle. A battered Germany agreed to an armistice that went into effect on November 11, 1918. Reading a text closely provides insight into the author's perspective. Let's delve deeper into Cornlou's account to explore his thoughts, values, and beliefs about the 22nd Battalion's experience in the war, and particularly during the last 100 days. After years of combat and having witnessed the devastation at Saint-Éloi, Courcelette, and Passchendaele earlier in the war, Cornlou was sometimes overcome with emotion. The dead we saw in thousands in this unbearable twist on the path of life. Our dearest friends have succumbed. Our leaders and our brothers have been engulfed eternally. By the last 100 days, he was physically and mentally exhausted. We marched forward, always forward. We advanced, leaving behind our dead and our wounded, and we leave again on the road of infinite misery. It's October 20th. There are talks of peace, and yet this war has never been so harsh. But we sense, we feel that it's the end. What must these 100 days have meant for men's ability to cope, to survive? It is difficult to fully understand what another person experienced and felt at the time, especially after analyzing only selected excerpts from one primary source. However, this primary source offers fascinating insights into one soldier's perspective on the war and the soldiers who fought. As you read through and assess Cornlou's account, develop conclusions based on what you observe and what you can infer about the Vendôme's experience during the war. Is Cornlou's account of the Vendôme's experience reliable? More than 4 years have passed, and during those 4 years, the 22nd has grown 100-fold, rising higher than the sublime and preserving the purest of military glories. During those 4 years, throughout the violence of the battles, it never ceded any ground, never retreated an inch. Cornlou's belief that his fellow soldiers' sacrifices were not in vain shaped how he told his story. How does Cornlou portray his comrades, and how does this affect his narrative? What conclusions can we draw from examining his versions of the Vendôme's exploits? Cornlou was just one of hundreds of thousands of Canadian soldiers in the First World War, and the 22nd Battalion was only one unit among many. Did the horrors Cornlou experienced during the war impact his ability to write a trustworthy account of the Vendômes? Is the book useful for those who want to learn more about the Vendôme's experience in the war? To more fully understand Cornlou's account and his portrayal of the Vendôme's experience during the last 100 days, we need to compare and corroborate what we've learned with other primary and secondary sources. Is Cornlou's description of the last 100 days supported by other primary sources, such as soldiers' diaries, memoirs, letters and reports, newspapers, or secondary sources such as historians' books? In what ways do they differ? What questions do you still have? Over time, most individual memories, stories, and traces are lost, and the past is silent. The primary sources that remain help shape our understanding of historical events. We can only work with the evidence that survives. For a historian, this means there is rarely a complete picture of the past. More often, we are given a window to look through, a glimpse into the bigger picture of history.